AETN Public Affairs Special, Fighting Fraud and Scams, is underwritten in part by AARP Arkansas.
Hello and welcome to AETN's Public Affairs Special, Fighting Fraud and Scams. I'm your host, Jason Pederson. Now, according to the Federal Trade Commission, the top scams in 2018 were impostor scams, debt collection, and identity theft. And as of September 2019, there have been over 1,300 identity thefts reported right here in Arkansas. Joining me on how to better protect ourselves, recognize, and report scams are Seth Boffeli. He's advisor for the AARP Fraud Prevention Program. Kathleen Pursell, Program Director for the Arkansas Senior Medicare Patrol for the Arkansas Department of Human Services, Division of Aging, Adult, and Behavioral Health Services. Chuck Harder, Deputy Attorney General for the Arkansas Attorney General's Office. Allison Bragg, Assistant U.S. Attorney for the U.S. Attorney's Office, Eastern District of Arkansas. And Paul Ecker, a U.S. Postal Inspector for the United States Postal Inspection Service. Thanks to everyone for joining us. Paul, let's start with you. You come to us out of the Fort Worth Division of the Postal Service. In addition to being a postal inspector, you're also the Public Information Officer. Since you are here in Arkansas, is it safe to assume your territory includes Arkansas?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when I got into consumer reporting 20 years ago, the big scam was the brown envelopes coming from Nigeria. And I was wondering, do scam artists still use the Postal Service to target people? Do they still use the mail?
In fact, they do. The Postal Service still provides one of the most secure methods of communication, both parcels and mail, and that security is what they still like to exploit. It's a way for them to get their proceeds and be able to track it. They like to know where their money is, and they still use the mail to further their schemes.
All right, we'll learn more about why they use the mail. One of those reasons is the senior citizens are often a target of these scammers. So let's meet Allison Bragg. Allison is with the U.S. Attorney's Office. You go after and prosecute some of the people we're going to be learning about in these scams, including those who operate Ponzi schemes. Our panelists probably don't know this, but when you were in law school, you were judged the best closing argument, not just in Arkansas, but in the entire nation. So I imagine people who run Ponzi schemes have to be good orators as well. What similarities do you see in those who you've put away for running scams?
Right. Well, you hate to ever analogize yourself to a scammer, but it's a good thing to notice because these people do have a lot of talent. You would hope that people would use their talents for good and to pursue justice, but there are some people who use it to pursue fraud, and that's a very good similarity. One thing that we often see is people becoming victimized because this person has built a rapport and has built trust with that person, which is one way that these predators operate. So it's always important to know that not everyone is telling the truth, and especially for older Americans, we can see that sometimes they fall victim to that persuasiveness and to that charm.
Yeah, and a lot of people feel shame because they get scammed, but you have to remember that the scam artists are making a living doing what they're doing because they're very good at it. And so these smooth talkers that you've helped prosecute and put away are some of the ones we need to watch out for. Chuck Harder. Chuck is the Deputy Attorney for Public Protection. When it comes to protection, Chuck, we often think of police officers or military members. From your perspective, military members are often targeted by scammers. Why is that?
Well, Allison hit on it. One of the keys to being a successful con artist is to build that trust. And what makes the veterans and active duty members susceptible to fraud is the camaraderie they share. And so con artists go the extra mile to pretend like they're a member of the military or they're a veteran to try and gain that trust. And once they've gained that trust, military members have access to either good benefits or good pay, and they often have life savings that the con artists go at. And so it makes them susceptible. With active duty, there's also the extra element if the service member is overseas, there's problems and difficulty in communicating between the active duty service member and the family back at home. There's concern about finances at home, sometimes lack of communication, confusion, and it leaves open the people at home to being susceptible to scams, to feel pressure when they're told that a bill needs to be paid that hasn't been paid, or that some money needs to be paid on behalf of the service member. And so it leaves them susceptible.
So we probably have some active military or former military watching. What can military members and their families do to protect themselves?
Be skeptical. First and foremost, be skeptical. One of the things that the scam artist tries to do is to make you feel pressured, and to feel pressured to act quickly without thinking about it and doing research. It's just slow it down. Slow down the process, be skeptical, don't act in the moment. Take your time, do your research, and get back with the person. May I have your telephone number? I'll call you back. And then reach out to people that you trust, people in the VA, people in the Attorney General's office, to get more information before you make a decision and give up your finances.
All right. Another one of our panelists today is Kathleen Pursell. She heads up the Arkansas Senior Medicare Patrol. It operates under the old adage that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, meaning it's easier and cheaper to help seniors before they lose their money than it is to try to get their money back. Not just seniors, but anyone. One example is the Medicare Social Security impostor scam. Tell us about that scam and how it works.
Yes, that's a particularly scary scam for seniors or older Americans, because it's often involving their Social Security card that has been found in an abandoned vehicle, or a vehicle that has been involved in criminal activity like heroin in the trunk, or accident where they killed someone, and so they're terrified and end up having to, the first thing they do is say, it's not my Social Security number, it's not my card, and so they're transferred to another phone number, and that's when they ultimately are asked for their personal information, and they give their Social Security number, and it's just a scary scam.
So it starts with the Social Security number, but then they start getting other information based off of that?
Right, they get their Social Security number and any other personal information that they can verify their identity.
And once they get that information, do they then open up accounts, or how do they? It always leads to financial
Absolutely.
fraud, because that's what the scam artists
Sure.
are after, money. Is that what happens?
All kinds of things, anything from Medicare fraud to stealing identities.
And so I asked Chuck, how can people watching avoid that or prevent that? What tips do you have for folks?
The main message of our program is to never give personal information to anyone who calls them over the phone, especially government agencies, because they typically don't call asking for personal information. And it's really hard because to get that message out and for them to understand that just because they say they're with Medicare or they say they're with Social Security, they're trusting and they believe that that's who it is, especially with the spoofing on the phone lines, that they believe that's who it is that's really calling, so they're more apt to give their information. A really scary thing about that as well is sometimes they know some of your information already, like one of the calls I got was they knew the last four of their social and needed to verify the rest of it. So they thought, well, they had given it, they already knew it, so they gave it all away.
All right, thanks, Kathleen. We'll hear more from you in a moment. But Seth Boffeli is our final panelist. Seth's a fraud prevention specialist out of St. Paul via the Washington, D.C. office for AARP. You travel to all the states, so we thank you for being here in Arkansas with us today. You're in the South. Is there things that scam artists use against us as Southerners when they're trying to separate us from our money?
Well, I think one thing that sort of any scam artist is looking for is someone who's trusting. And so Southerners are very trusting, especially older Southerners. I think another thing we see a lot in Southern states are veterans, like Chuck talked about, veterans-associated scams. And sometimes it's not just targeting the veteran or the active duty member, but targeting someone who has an affinity or a love for veterans, so it could be a fake veterans charity. We see a lot of Facebook impostor scams where someone's on Facebook pretending to be a veteran, maybe serving overseas, and trying to get money out of someone to help them get home and see their family. The victim sends that money and the person never arrives.
So we're entering the holiday season. Is AARP warning your members about specific scams related to the holidays? Everyone's feeling a little generous right now.
We're really active on holiday scams right now. The fake charities really pop up this time of year. You know, everybody has heard and seen about the porch pirates. There's just a lot of, it 'tis the season, as they say, and this is the time where scammers are out trying to get people's money.
I saw the top story on the news last night was a porch pirate story. You always have the good video, but I don't know that they ever catch them. I'm sure they do some, but what do you advise your members? Not to have packages delivered to your house?
Well, you know, it's if you're not going to try to schedule it to be to come when you're home if you know you're going to be home. If you know you're not going to be home, talk to your neighbors, see if they can get your package. I think the Postal Service and also Amazon offers these lockers, so instead of having it delivered to your house, you can, I know at my grocery store they have a big Amazon locker when you come in, so have it delivered there if you're not going to be home, and then when you stop to pick up your groceries, you can pick up your package too, and you know it's going to be safe.
All right. Thanks, Seth. You know, these men and women have a lot of information that they want to share with you to help protect you as scam artists target you. So stealing your personal information online is just another way scammers can get to you if you don't protect yourself when using the internet. Let's look at one of the former masterminds of cybercrime and how he's now working to protect you.
I am the guy who built the first organized cybercrime community, and it laid the foundation that modern cybercrime channels still follow today. I was placed on the United States Most Wanted list, arrested. I served 7.5 years in federal prison. There's no way I can make amends for the damage I caused in the past. Today, I try to help people avoid and protect themselves against the type of person that I used to be. The internet is made up of basically 3 different areas. The first is the surface web. Basically, that's everything that you can find on Google. That's 4% of the internet. The other 96% is the deep web. That's medical billing and emails, anything that's behind some sort of wall. Within that deep web is what's called the dark web, and the dark web is where a lot of criminal activity takes place, things like that. Your information can be sold at large there. I can buy your social security number and your date of birth for $2.90. I can buy your complete identity profile. That's your name, your address, your social security, your date of birth, your mother's maiden, your driver's license number, your background check, and your credit report. I can buy that entire profile for a low of $40 and a high of $130. Just last year, there were 1,500 reported breaches, 2.6 billion records compromised. Your information is out there. So knowing that, then what do you do about it? There are basically 3 things. The first is you freeze the credit of yourself and every single person in the house, including the kids, because children are the #1 victims of identity theft. But a credit freeze only takes care of new account fraud. So you also have to monitor existing accounts. That's bank accounts, credit cards, email logins, merchant logins. Put alerts on all accounts that you can. The third thing, passwords. We don't know how to do passwords properly. We use the same password across multiple websites. Criminals know that, so what I advise people to do is use a password manager. It's basically a software program that picks passwords for you. Make sure you're more safe. Those 3 things, freezing credit, monitoring accounts, using a password manager, that makes sure that you're not the low-hanging fruit and you're not going to be as easy a victim as all these other people.
All right, I don't know about you, but when I watch that, I'm kind of wanting to stay offline altogether. And I'm guilty of using the same password on multiple platforms, so maybe you can relate to that as well. Allison, did you see anything in that as a federal prosecutor that rang true or that you've dealt with in the past in prosecuting folks?
Absolutely. He made some excellent points, and everything he said is unfortunately very accurate. And he would know, because as he said, he's one of the people that used to be those that we would look into and those that we would prosecute. But as far as protecting your information and making sure that those things don't become available, it all kind of harkens back to some of the things we all mentioned before. To be skeptical, as Chuck pointed out. To not always believe, as Kathleen pointed out, that just because someone says they're calling from a certain place, they may or may not be telling you the truth. And one thing that is important based on that video we just saw is that is an individual who took so much money from hardworking, innocent Americans that he spent 7.5 years in federal prison. That's something that we want to pursue when we can identify the target, when we can identify the defendant, but unfortunately we often cannot. And so it really is up to individuals to make sure that they're looking out for themselves and that they're protecting themselves, because sometimes once it's reached us, it may be too late.
And Allison prosecutes at the federal level. Chuck, you with the Attorney General's office have one of the big sticks in your bag is the Deceptive Trade Practices Act. Is that the type of statute that you would go after someone like this under?
Oh, absolutely. If we can identify and the con artist and be able to identify them and go after them and investigate, under the Deceptive Trade Practices Act, there's a lot of different things that we can get them for. Basically, the deception. If they've used a robocaller, we can go after them for that. If they've spoofed, the penalties are stiff. In addition to restitution to consumers, the fines can be as high as $10,000 per occurrence. You know, and if they've scammed 100 people, that's 100 times $10,000. It's a big deterrent for people we can get. The problem is a lot of the scammers are overseas, a lot of the scammers are in other states. Makes our ability to enforce more difficult. So, as others have indicated, we really want to inform consumers to prevent the fraud from happening. It's better to prevent the fraud than to try after the fact to make things right.
Let me throw this out to any of you as panelists. He was talking about cybercrime, and you think of internet and phones and stuff as more the youth always on their phones and always in that, but why are seniors so susceptible to cyber criminals?
One reason is because they don't do online. I think that there's this false sense of security because I don't have an email or I don't do online banking that I'm somehow protected by it. But if a criminal gets your bank account, say through the mail, they can go online, they can actually open up on online banking access to your account through their own, just by impersonating you. So it really is important to be even if you're not going to use that online portal to do your banking, to at least have access to it so you can monitor it, so you know that nobody else takes that over pretending to be you.
Anybody else?
Some seniors don't realize that identity theft, when you say someone's going to steal your identity and possibly open a credit card or bank account, they assume, well, I don't have any credit. It's not that they're going after their money, they're opening a new one. And so there's just a little education that needs to be done as far as internet and identity theft, and it is because they don't have enough experience on the internet, so they just click on everything and open things and respond because they're so trusting.
Paul, Kathleen mentioned education. What does the Postal Service do to help educate not only seniors but anyone about fraud or scams?
Well, the three tenets in the inspection service are protect. We want to protect the Postal Service, its infrastructure in the mail. We want to enforce all the laws. And on that note, there's over 200 statutes related to the mail. The first consumer protection law was the mail fraud statute. So it's important that we've been in this from the beginning. And then we want to help prevent. So we want to keep the confidence in the mail. And so by doing that, we go out, we do these projects and raise awareness to these types of things.
I should mention, we had a law enforcement member who was going to join our panel, but unfortunately he was out on an all-night assignment, so he couldn't be with us. One thing I have learned through visiting with law enforcement members over the years is one of the saddest types of cases they investigate is when seniors get scammed and lose the retirement they worked their entire lives to build. And that's one of the reasons why scam artists target seniors, is because they know they have a nest egg, and as I think Seth mentioned, they can be very trusting. And when you have that combination of a trusting person with some money set aside, you got scam artists licking their chops.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that we don't talk about enough is there's just a tremendous amount of shame that goes with, people just feel like they've been duped or they're a sucker. The reality is these are criminal enterprises. These are international organizations that are using sophisticated technology and techniques to take advantage of people, to victimize people, and we only know what's being reported, and so it's really important that that even if it's just an attempt, even if it's just a phone call that you pick up and you hang up with right away, it's important to report that so that law enforcement knows that these are the type of scams that are active in their community.
To agree with that point, the Department of Justice estimates that only 1 in 44 of these types of incidents is ever reported to law enforcement. And that's a perfect example of how we're not able to help at all if that's not reported to us. And I think everyone here would encourage seniors who have encountered that or who have been victimized not to feel that sense of shame, because people think, oh, I shouldn't have let this happen. I can't believe I fell for this. We take calls frequently where that's the running line throughout the entire phone call. They'll tell me the facts of what happened and they'll keep repeating, I should have known, I should have known. And listen to that intuition. If you are thinking that, maybe it is good to think that you are correct about that and being skeptical. But because of that 1 in 44 statistic, only 1 in 44 of those being reported, there's not a lot that we can do if we don't know about it.
It's been our experience at the Attorney General's office that seniors are susceptible to scams. And it's kind of an odd thing. Maybe not to the degree as younger people or others, but the financial impact is much greater, and it's their finances. And as everybody's talked about it, they try to fix things themselves. They don't want somebody to help them out of a jam. So things like tech support scams, where they get in way over their head. They give access to their computers to people they don't know. And also things like sweetheart scams and investment scams, where they act without consulting others. And so we try to encourage, talk to your buddies, talk to your peers, talk to your kids, talk to your investment advisor before you let a lot of money go out of your bank account.
You mentioned involving others. One of the things with seniors I've talked to is they don't want to necessarily involve others because they love their independence, and by involving others they feel like they're risking their independence. What can a loved one who is worried about a senior, who is an independent senior, but is worried about their susceptibility to scams, how can those loved ones or friends or neighbors approach them and convince them that this would be a good idea if you always run something by me or you or her? Or, do you have a suggestion?
Well, we try to get the message out. We're big into planning. You know, you need to plan ahead. At some point in time, you may not have the capacity to make the decisions that you need to make, and so you need to plan for that. You need to start the process now of building those people that you trust, because someday you may need their help. And for the loved ones and others that are involved, it's the communication. It's to getting involved, knowing what's going on, keeping up, keeping in touch. That's very important to protecting parents and other seniors, is to have that communication and understand what's going on in their lives, so that when something unusual happens, you can have a discussion with them about, hey, what's going on? Help me understand why you've got these big withdrawals in your bank account, or help me understand why you went to Walgreens and you bought a bunch of Apple gift cards. What's going on?
The AARP, you guys have a newsletter. Do you put features in the newsletter on fraud and scams and stories of people who have been scammed, so that we're going to see in a little bit how the grandparent scam works, and it's powerful to be able to have a first-hand account or to witness what happened, because sometimes those details are very similar. Do you guys put things like that in the newsletter?
Yeah, you know, every month AARP magazine has a feature on fraud, and we also do an AARP bulletin that goes out monthly that has numerous features on fraud. We're doing polling kind of throughout the year on consumer insights on fraud and fraudulent practices, you know, trying to inform people. One thing that we saw this year was when we asked people about how likely they are, you know, this spoofing thing that Chuck talked about, when you get your caller ID says it's from a local number, but it's coming from Nigeria or someplace like that. You know, that's something people are just much more likely, again, getting back to the trusting thing, if it has your local area code or maybe your local exchange, you're much more likely to pick up that phone thinking it's somebody down the street when it's somebody halfway across the country. So just trying to stay on top of what these, because the con artists are changing their tactics all the time. They're becoming so much more sophisticated. So we use all of our communications vehicles to try to get the word out in real time if we can.
Kathleen, DHS helps so many people in Arkansas. Some of the people who need help the most are on Medicare. What about Medicare fraud?
Medicare fraud is really rampant nationwide as well as in our state. So DHS helps a lot. As we just put out a press release on something through DHS, so that was a really good venue to do that. But yeah, we educate. We have a newsletter as well. We put fraud alerts in it, and local fraud and nationwide fraud schemes, and our phone number is always available for someone to call in and report. So
you mentioned a number. We've got some information that we can share with our viewers right now about a number you can call to report the Arkansas Senior Medicare Patrol. What are the kind of things you're looking for, the types of calls you get?
We, well, our helpline will take any calls from billing issues where claims may have been denied by Medicare, suspected fraud, billing for items that were never received, billing for services that were never received, overcharging, all kinds of fraud in that way. But also we'll take scam calls. Most of the time that's the only time we hear about scams that are going around, so that we can educate the state from what we hear. And you know, we are always looking for places to present, so any kind of call to give us a place to go and present our message would be beneficial as well.
And Paul, with the Postal Inspector's Office, you're with the Public Information Office as well. How do you get your message out to folks in your area?
Well, we are always going out to events. We have a number of events that we go to. Our inspectors are always available to go out and give presentations. We also have our website and other outreach mechanisms, and so we would love to interact with the community and make sure that messaging gets out there to help prevent these things from happening.
Do they contact you with questions as well? Like, is it an interactive process where they can reach out to you guys?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can give you our phone number is 877-876-2455. That's an easy way, or you can link us through USPS or the USPIS.gov site.
I mentioned that so much can be learned through real-life examples of scams, because oftentimes scammers use a template or kind of use the same techniques, although you mentioned they're changing. Do any of you have any stories? That could be a sad story. You obviously leave the names out, but a story that our viewers might benefit from hearing as far as that happened to them. Don't let it happen to you. You're nodding your head, Allison.
I am. I can share really an ongoing scam that I think people should be aware of in case they do get a call or an email like this. We're investigating currently, and because it's an ongoing investigation, I can't be particularly detailed, but there is an issue right now with people receiving phone calls and emails saying that they've missed a court appearance. Just a phone call out of the blue. This is Deputy such and such with the United States Marshals, and you did not appear for jury duty. You were summoned to appear for jury duty and you didn't appear, and if you don't pay me X amount of dollars, we're going to come and we're going to arrest you, and we're going to be there in 30 minutes, and so you need to give me a credit card number right now. That is not real. The Marshals will not call you. I think somebody made the point earlier, we're not always going to knock on the door with you having a phone call warning. Sometimes they just knock on the door. If they want to arrest you and they have a reason to do that, a phone call is probably not going to be the precursor to that happening. But people get nervous and there's a sense of urgency. Sometimes we've noticed there's really two types of ways to defraud people. One is through charm and trust, and one is through intimidation. This is more of an intimidation scam. And what they will try to do also, I think Chuck made the point, be skeptical and take your time. There's probably not an emergency where you have to pay this money if it's legitimate. One indicator here is the sense of urgency. Pay your money now. If you pay me your money now, I won't come arrest you.
Well, they mentioned 30 minutes.
Right,
So
they mentioned
they create
a time
the false
frame.
sense of urgency, yeah.
And so that is something. If you get a phone call here in this time frame, that is an ongoing scam that we're investigating. And the Marshals are not going to call you and tell you that there's an arrest warrant because you didn't appear for court. If you're summoned to court, you should appear, make no mistake. But these are people who have not received a summons to go to court. And that's one way to know that it is a scam.
That's a good point. The Marshals aren't going to call you. The IRS is not going to call you at home. They're not going to email you. They'll send you a letter through the Postal Service if they want to get a hold of you. There's a lot of agencies that just aren't going to call you, but you don't know that. If you don't know that ahead of time, you could fall for that.
One of the problems that we have is people have been desensitized to certain things that in the past would have been red flags. It is getting an email from a business that you do, from Microsoft or Apple. So many times companies encourage you to go paperless, and that's how they communicate with you. So you're desensitized to the fact that you've gotten an email and you suspect it to be the case. Whenever you get an email saying that you have a problem that needs to be fixed or otherwise, take a look at the email address of the sender that comes in. Most often it's going to be a bunch of gobbledygook. If you get an email from somebody from Microsoft, Microsoft.com is going to be in that email address. The other thing too is don't reply or hit a link in an email address. Again, take your time, don't get in a rush. If Microsoft says you have a problem, step away from the email, go to the Microsoft website, find out how to contact them. Go to the company to find out how it wants to be contacted, whether it's a phone call or a chat or otherwise, to check directly with the company to see if you have the problem the email says you have.
One thing that people don't realize is opting out. It sometimes seems like a good thing. I want to opt out. But when you opt out, it lets the scammers know that email address is active and is a good email address. They may not get you, but they're going to sell your active email address to other scammers. And all of a sudden, you're going to get 10 times, 20 times the amount of scam emails you used to get just because you thought you were doing a good thing by opting out. The best thing to do when you get an email that you don't recognize is what?
Delete it.
Delete it.
Delete it. The best thing to do when you get a phone call and you're not sure what it's about is what?
Just hang up.
Just hang up. I mean, it's so, but you know what? You're here in the South.
Yeah.
And we're not rude down here. I don't know how you guys are up in St. Paul, but we're very polite in the South.
Well,
and especially the elderly. They don't like to hang up, or I don't know if they mind deleting, but they don't like to be rude.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, it's not rude to just not pick up the phone. But you know, these folks, these scammers are looking for people who are at home, who are available, who may be looking for somebody to talk to. You know, I think I dealt with in Minnesota, one of our tragic stories was a woman whose mom fell victim to a foreign lottery scam. I think she lost over $50,000. And really the way that she was victimized over the phone was that she just was lonely. She wanted somebody to talk to. In the period of time that this was happening, that she was being robbed, essentially, her spirits were never brighter. You know, so the outward signs that she was showing to her family were positive because she had somebody to talk to. But then there's also kind of a fear and a manipulation that goes into it. And this woman at one point she was coached to go to a bank to take out a $40,000 payment advance on a credit card and take that cash and wire it to these scammers. And her daughter asked her, "What did you think, Mom, when you were driving to this Walmart with $40,000 in cash in an envelope?" And her mom said, "I don't know, because they had my mind." And it really is, whether it's fear or whether it's excitement, these con artists have a way of really kind of, we call it getting you in the ether. You're just, you ask somebody, like, did it seem weird that you were buying prepaid gift cards at Walmart? Well, not really, because they're so captivated or they're so afraid of what might happen that kind of reason goes out the window.
Yeah, so that was probably, and whoever scammed her is beyond the reach of our prosecutors, law enforcement, and that money's gone, and they're left to pick up the pieces.
Absolutely.
So that's really the purpose of this panel, is to prevent stories like that from happening here in Arkansas. They do happen in Arkansas, and that's why television programs like this are so necessary. There's all types of telephone scams that can take you by surprise if you're not aware of the signs. We're going to show you one in particular that's commonly known as the grandparent scam that can turn a person's love and concern for their relative into a loss of thousands of dollars in a matter of mere minutes.
Hello? Help? With what? Wait, who is this?
Who's on
James? Are you all right?
Who's on the phone?
Well,
Is that
James,
James?
Where are you?
What's happening?
Guatemala.
What's he doing in Guatemala?
Please, Becky, I'm trying to hear
But
James.
I want to know what's going on.
What?
What?
No, wait, this doesn't sound like you.
Wait, what happened? What is he doing?
$2,000? Why?
$2,000?
Have you? That's a lot of money, James.
That is a lot of money.
Have you called your parents?
Yeah, why is he calling us? Is he okay? Is James okay?
Money.
But you know what? He's our grandson. We have to, if he gets out of, I mean, he's
yes,
our
yes,
grandson.
yes, yes. We'll send it.
Here. Yeah, write it there.
This financial ruse has been around for years. You get a call from someone pretending to be your grandchild. They explain they're in a foreign country and they've had an accident, injury, or in jail. Often the caller tells you that a third person, such as a lawyer, doctor, or police officer, will explain everything to you. This makes it seem more real when you think you're speaking with someone with authority. Then the caller will ask you to send or wire money immediately. With the kicker, please don't tell mom and dad. The scammers are very good at what they do. They make the story very convincing and urgent. Take a moment to slow down and ask yourself, is this situation real? Verify the person's identity by asking questions someone else couldn't possibly answer, such as the name and species of your grandchild's first pet. Get off the phone and check with a family member or the person who supposedly called you. Your grandchild may just answer his phone from the privacy of their home or dorm. Another giveaway is how the scammer wants to receive the money. Usually, it's through a wire transfer such as Western Union or MoneyGram, or a prepaid card or a gift card. Don't call them back. Remember, court systems and hospitals don't accept gift cards as payments. Protect yourself against grandparent scams by adjusting your privacy settings on your social media accounts. Safeguard your email by using antivirus and anti-spyware software. Never open attachments in emails from people you don't know. They may contain software programs that enable criminals to access your computer remotely. If you're a victim of grandparent scam or any other form of fraud, report it to the FTC at ftc.gov/complaint or by calling 1-877-FTC-HELP. When it comes to fraud, vigilance is our #1 weapon. You have the power to protect yourself and your loved ones from scams. To learn more about these and other types of frauds, visit us at aarp.org/Fraud Watch Network.
So I enjoy depictions like this because it kind of shows you how it works. When the couple is on the phone with their grandson, you can kind of sense the panic and the fear and the confusion. You couldn't hear the other side of the call, but one thing that we've learned through these scams is they try to get little bits of information. So the scammer probably said, "Grandpa, this is your grandson." And then he said, "James?" So now the scammer knows that the grandson's name is James, and he can build off that. Yes, it's James. And they get little bits of information through the conversation that build and build until the person on the victim is obvious. It's their grandson. They know so much about James, it has to be my grandson. The Fraud Watch Network, because you guys look into, especially with AARP.
So our AARP Fraud Watch Network is really a nationwide resource. We're doing fraud prevention programming in all 50 states, including here in Arkansas through AARP Arkansas. But it really is, we're trying to reach people with information any way we can. So through videos like we just watched, we have online fact sheets for really just about every scam that comes across. We're doing investigative reporting through the AARP Bulletin and the AARP Magazine. We have a podcast, and so really, you know, this is something that we just have to communicate about, and so we're trying to reach people any way we can through programs like this. You know, where there's 36 different states where we're doing some sort of media outreach to try to just spread the word, because again, getting this information in front of especially seniors who are the most vulnerable is important, but you almost have to do it every 6 months because the scams are changing that quickly. You always have to be reminding people, whether it's the phishing attacks on email or the spoofing phone call attacks, or you know, whatever the latest Medicare or Social Security related scam is. You always have to be communicating what the threats are to people, because people over 50 have a tremendous amount of assets, and that's where, you know, bank robbers rob banks because that's where the money is. Well, in direct consumer fraud, the money is really in the 50-plus community, and that's why they're targeted over and over again.
So you mentioned these scams are always changing. There's always something new. So it's December of 2019. What's the new stuff? What's the new things that our viewers need to be watching out for that maybe they haven't heard of?
Yeah.
Any of you?
I'd like to bring up the DNA genetic testing, cancer screening scam that's going around. It's been going around most of the year, the first that we heard in Arkansas, and it's
I haven't heard of that. How does that work?
This is where a company recruits individuals to basically scout out seniors and get them to do a cheek swab, which is quote unquote 100% paid for by Medicare and Medicare approved, and the seniors.
So do they come to their house?
They are getting them through email, phone calls, Facebook, and then door to door in senior community housing communities and senior centers as well. So it's sweeping the nation and as well as Arkansas. It's pretty bad.
So what is the scam with the cheek swab? They have to provide their personal information to make sure
Absolutely.
that. So that's what
so
they're
it's
after.
Medicare approved. they say it's Medicare approved, 100% paid for. They just need their Medicare number, all their personal information. They do a cheek swab, they send it off to a lab, and then they get the results back. So the way it works is each person who does a cheek swab is paid a certain amount, anywhere from $500 to $900 per cheek swab. You've got laboratories who are getting in on the Medicare payment for their lab services that they bill Medicare for. And then you have the beneficiary who may or may not ever get a result back, and that's when they get worried because they didn't get the result back. And then they also get a Medicare statement that shows that huge amounts of money were paid to the laboratories in $22,000, and then sometimes the beneficiary is then billed for the remaining balance. So it's a pretty egregious
So there's
scheme.
a lot of tentacles to this scam. A lot of
lot.
people making money off this.
And so many people don't realize that it is a scam because of the trust. And the problem with it is that they're not reporting it. And especially the senior centers where multiple people gave their cheek swabs, and I will hear from the director that, well, that happened to us. I didn't know it was a scam, and it doesn't help if those beneficiaries don't come forward and report it. So
what's the bottom line that the viewers need to know? That if someone approaches you and asks you for a cheek swab for this DNA genetic testing, it's automatically a scam? Medicare would not be going out to do that?
Yes, because the way it happens is Medicare will pay for very just a really, you have to be, a doctor's orders have to
You would have to go to a
prescribe
hospital
it.
to do this.
Well, you have to be under doctor's orders.
Under
They
doctor's-
have to prescribe it. It
Right.
has to be a very specific cancer related, you're already undergoing treatment for.
You're not doing random screenings out there.
Absolutely not going door to door, email, Facebook, random
Good.
at senior centers. So anything involving that is a scam. Absolutely.
Unless your doctor asked for a cheek swab, it's probably a scam. Almost definitely a scam, so just don't do it. Any other new stuff that's out there, Chuck?
I think to watch out for in the coming months is 2020 is a big year. The U.S. Census is going to take place. There are going to be a lot of people that are going to be contacted to give information to the U.S. government or who they think is the U.S. government. We don't know what every one of those scams are going to look like, but there will be scams. And so take the time now to learn about how the census is going to be conducted. You know, there are reports, a lot of it's going to be online. Find out how that works. What can you expect in terms of door-to-door telephone calls from census takers? Know how it's going to happen and how the government plans to do this so that when you hear something that's different, it raises a red flag for you.
That's a great point, that scammers are at their core, well, they're greedy, but they're also opportunists. And following a natural disaster, that's when the scammers move in. The census in 2020 gives them an opportunity. They're always looking for opportunities. Any other new examples of scams that are out there?
One thing that we're just starting to see in Florida, and a lot of times these new scams start in Florida and then
because
spread.
that's where a lot of seniors live.
Exactly. It's really, it involves an ATM card. So a senior will get a call at home from someone claiming to be the bank, and they'll say, you know, did you charge $75 at Home Depot yesterday? And they'll say, no, I never did. And so then the scammer says, we thought this was a suspected purchase, you know, your ATM card, your debit card has been compromised. We have somebody in the neighborhood who can rectify this for you. They're going to stop by and they're going to pick up your ATM card, and you just need to give them the PIN, and then we'll send you a new ATM card in the mail. So the senior thinks that their card has been compromised. They think it's just been verified by the bank. The person shows up and they turn over their debit card with the PIN number, and the scammer goes right to the closest ATM and empties out everything in the account. By the time the senior finds out that they've been scammed, all their money's gone. And because it was not a credit card but a debit card, getting that money back is very, very, very difficult. So again, we're seeing it in Florida. We're not necessarily seeing it in a bunch of other states, but it's just a good thing to look out for. Because we do get the, you know, credit cards, you do get emails, you know, saying that, you know, verifying your purchase. So it's masking itself in something that you routinely get, but it happens over the phone, which is not, again, not a way that the bank communicates with you.
Paul, back in the day when mail was the primary way that scammers got to us, they would make their letters, letterhead, return address look very official. It would look like it was really from a company. It was really from the phone company or the whoever was trying to contact them. Do you see that still, or do you see that in emails? Do you see that, are they still as authentic as they used to be, authentic looking?
Sure, and the problem, what we see is, and we've mentioned a number of types of scams, everything from the lottery and the sweepstakes to the IRS type scams. The romance scams are really becoming popular with the types of apps out there, the multiple dating sites out there. And what we see are a lot of variations on these scams. An individual could get up to 30. We just dealt with an individual who's getting almost up to 50 types of mailings, and a lot of different variations. They're getting creative, trying to revive some of the old scams. We just dealt with one where a person was being defrauded because they had already lost a lot of money, and then they were being contacted by an individual claiming to be a lawyer who was filing a class action suit against these scammers. And just so for a small investment, for just a little more money, they would be able to retain their legal counsel and then get their money back. And so a lot of variations out there.
So we touched on it earlier, but you're mentioning a problem. Once someone falls for a scam, they're pretty much a target for life moving forward.
Absolutely.
Is there anything you guys know that, let's say someone out there watching, I was victimized by a scam, is there anything that you know they can do short of getting a new phone number, getting a new address, trying to change some of the things they can change to stop the mailings, stop the emails, stop the phone calls? Or is it just really difficult?
It's hard to stop. One thing that's actually just happening right now in Washington is there's a bipartisan bill that's called the Pulone-Thune Traced Act, TRACED, and it's going to require the telecom providers to use technology to find those spoof calls. So if it says IRS on the caller ID, the phone company will have to verify that it actually is coming from the IRS, and if it's not, they can intercept that call in the middle and cut it off before it gets to the consumer. And also included in the legislation is a requirement that the phone company can't charge you for doing that. And so that's something that we're really hopeful, in a time where not a lot of bipartisan work is happening in Washington. This is something that is passed, I think, both houses overwhelmingly, and we think is going to have at least an impact in limiting the number, because people are getting dozens and dozens of phone calls every single day. So anything we can do to lower the amount of calls that people are being subjected to is going to improve their odds of avoiding those scams.
Chuck, the Attorney General's office does have something for victims of identity theft.
Yes, we have the ability to rehabilitate your identity to come to our office. My department actually does that. They go through a process to create an identity for you that creditors can trust and rely upon.
Is it still called the Identity Theft Passport?
It is the Identity Theft Passport, and they can use that process as they try and rehabilitate their credit and their credit scores from a fraud. Wanted to jump back on the robocalls. That's been a real focus for the Attorney General here for the last session, and we've been pushing the FCC to remove barriers to allow companies not to make every call go through. And we've also been working in the last session of the legislature. We created incentives for phone companies to actively work to try and develop technologies that are going to identify spam and fraud thefts, and we're starting to see some apps come out now. Check with your telephone provider and find out if they offer that service. Some companies, my current telephone provider, I don't get the spam calls anymore, because if you're not in my contact list on my phone, the call doesn't go through. And if it is a legitimate call, they leave a voicemail, I call you back. And so we're going after those. We're going after the spoofing artists for the first time.
For those who don't know what spoofing is, it's basically I've got a number and it says 501, so
right.
I think it's someone local, but when I answer it, it's not.
Yeah, pretending to be somebody you're not, which is a fundamental. So we're going after the tools that they have. We're going after the robocallers. We've increased that crime from a misdemeanor to a felony. We're working on the telephone companies to stop it. Same thing with spoofing. Spoofing is now a crime. It wasn't beforehand. And the telephone companies now, because under the new law, they're going to be more accountable to consumers and to the public.
Because they have deadlines they have to meet.
Oh, they have deadlines. They have to report to the Public Service Commission every year what steps they're taking to address the problem. And if they aren't taking the proper steps, we can go after them. And so there's a huge incentive for them to work with us, and we're seeing some progress in that regard. So we're actively involved in that. But consumers need to reach out to your telephone provider. What do they offer that will allow you to not receive the calls you don't need to be receiving?
Allison, you didn't get a chance to talk about new scams, so I want to hear from you on what new scams might be out there, but also from a prosecution standpoint, how do you decide which scam artists are worth prosecuting and which ones aren't? Is there a financial threshold? Is there a number of victims that you have to consider, or how is that decision made?
There's not a bright line rule. We don't have a dollar amount that we require. More dollars is more serious to us, of course, but one thing we always look at is a vulnerable victim. Not just age is a contributing factor to that, excuse me, but some things that contribute to that, or if that person has any sort of diminished capacity. A lot of older seniors are also dealing with physical challenges or mental decline at a certain point, and it's just not right to prey upon a person like that. And if we have information that that's what's happening, and most importantly, if we're able to identify that bad actor, we will investigate that person regardless of whether a certain dollar threshold has been met, because that is very important to us.
So any new scams folks need to know about?
Well, one thing that I would tell people to look out for is almost any time you're being asked over the phone or via email to purchase and pay for something with a gift card, a green dot card, a money card, MoneyGram, you should have some red flags raised. I don't want to overstep and say there's never a legitimate purpose for a card like that, but you need to be very sure. And I would say that if someone's asking you to pay for something by purchasing a money card of some kind, I would phone a friend. I would call a son or daughter, I would call a trusted friend in the community and say, hey, does this sound right to you? Because I heard these people on TV telling me that if somebody's asking me to pay for something by going to a store and purchasing a money card, that I should maybe ask for a second opinion, because chances are that's something that you should be very aware and very concerned about.
All right, let's start with Paul. I want to give each of you the opportunity to have one final thought for our viewers, one word of advice, or maybe a red flag to watch out for. Allison just mentioned a great one, the green dot or red dot money cards. Paul, what would you say to our Arkansas viewers that might help prevent them from being scammed?
Well, we've touched on some of this, and part of it would be involving the family not being embarrassed to ask for help. We get a lot of people that they're afraid to reach out to law enforcement or reach out to their family, and sometimes they don't want to involve their family. So talk to law enforcement, talk to a trusted friend, an associate, and vet whatever it is that's being addressed to you, vet that through somebody that's trusted, and find out what the rest of the story is on it.
So value consultation.
Absolutely.
Allison?
I would piggyback on that and say just know that you're not alone if something like this has happened to you, and that we're here to help and that we want to help. Our seniors in our state and in our country have made some of the most valuable contributions to our society, and maybe now it's our turn to contribute to them and to help them. And so I want people to know never to feel bad about something like this happening, and to know that we're here for them and that we want to help.
Chuck from the AG's office.
Yeah, one of the messages that we like to send out when we visit with seniors and others, if, general rule of thumb, if somebody you don't know contacts you about a problem you didn't know you have, and it has to be handled right now, and they're the only one that can help you, and it involves money, it's a scam.
All right. That's perfectly sound, reasonable advice. Kathleen?
One message the Senior Medicare Patrol tries to encourage seniors to do is to read their Medicare summary notice. I'm not sure that all Medicare recipients are aware that the only way to detect errors, for one, and most importantly, and suspected fraud, is to read that Medicare summary notice. Otherwise, the criminal or the bad actor has gotten away with the crime. They have already been paid for the service that was never provided or the item that was never delivered. So that's the only way to check it. And the criminal knows that a lot of seniors do not read that Medicare summary notice. So it's really important to open it up, look at it. Something's going to pop out off the page that's just not right. So.
Seth, the closing word is yours.
I think just be skeptical. If someone says you won the lottery, be skeptical. If someone says it's your grandson in jail, be skeptical. If someone sends you a link to click onto your bank, go to the bank website. Or if someone gives you the 800 number to call back for your credit card, pull out your credit card and flip it over. Just anything that you get on the phone or the email, be skeptical, because chances are it's leading you down the wrong path.
All right. So I want to thank all of our AETN viewers for spending this past hour with us. Our hope is that we have helped educate you and make you less susceptible to scam artists and the many tricks that they use in an attempt to separate you from your money. I'd also like to thank our panelists, Seth Boffeli, Kathleen Pursell, Chuck Harder, Allison Bragg, and Paul Ecker. With the Department of Human Services Office of the Ombudsman, I'm Jason Pederson. As we close this program, you will see several ways that you can learn more about scams and report fraud.
AETN Public Affairs Special, Fighting Fraud and Scams, is underwritten in part by AARP Arkansas.